Hello. Last Saturday, the Wangari Maathai Foundation hosted a webinar with Vanessa Natake, Olumide Idowu, Elizabeth Wathuti and Greta Thunberg, who all spoke about what they see when they close their eyes and imagine a future world where we've dealt with the threats of climate change. Each of them spoke about different things, about clear forest streams and children playing, about decision makers routinely consulting with young people, about clear skies and e-transport in cities, and effective plans to address those most vulnerable to climate. So I want to start with this vision and to build on how we can get to net zero in Africa. And I think we can do this in three main ways which power both national development and the livelihoods of young people. Firstly, renewable energy. There are massive opportunities in Africa to leapfrog its own industrial revolution by going straight to solar and wind, both on and off grid. Just last week, Mr. Simbine Tichakunda of the African Union Development Agency spoke about the continent-wide master plan for getting to renewables, and he specifically mentioned the value of renewable energy in meeting the needs of youth and their livelihoods. So policymakers get this. And when I visited Kenya earlier this year, I heard from PowerShift Africa and others about the need to divest from fossil fuels and leapfrog to renewables. Young people's organisations we're proud to work with undertook a survey of where access to reliable power fits in their priority basic needs. And they told us that 37.1% of the African youth respondents expressed digital exclusion as a high priority issue, and 30.3% experienced challenges accessing reliable and affordable electricity. Did you know that Kenya's national grid is already 95% supplied by renewable energy? So we already know what the future looks like on this continent. We want to see powerhouses like South Africa follow suit by moving towards wind, solar and green hydrogen. But it's one thing having a national energy supply which is fueled by renewables. The big challenge is then to make sure that everybody has access to either on-grid or off-grid sources of renewable energy and clean cooking. We still have a totally unacceptable situation where 50% of the population on the African continent still don't have access to power. We can and we must get there. My team and many others, many of you, are involved in talks with companies, with national governments and with investors about pathways countries in Africa can take towards this future. Imagine always knowing that your mobile will get charged, that you can make a living from designing the next solar-powered gadget, that there are plenty of jobs out there for installing solar panels, that agriculture can be transformed by solar-powered irrigation, that women no longer need to walk long hours into the bush to get firewood, which is becoming scarcer and scarcer, that there is always affordable and reliable power for transport, lighting, connectivity and cooking anytime you need it. That's part of a net zero Africa. The second pillar of how we'll get to net zero in Africa rests with the land. And this is key for urban champions to know. The UN estimates that by 2030, Africa will lose 2/3 of its arable land if the march of deforestation and desertification, leading to the spread of arid, desert-like areas of land, is not stopped. So we need to urgently restore degraded lands so that these and the millions of smallholder farmers who rely on farming can become more productive over time, can secure better livelihoods and richer, more resilient ecosystems. With the urbanisation speed in Africa, which is expected to be at 60% of Africa's population by 2050, urban agriculture too needs to be an integral part of securing needed food. Urban agriculture also represents an untapped potential for job creation for millions of young people in Africa. And so a need to restore and secure land through restoration, and for cities and urban populations to be fed using both those restored lands and urban agriculture is going to be essential to making sure that the land around the cities is cared for. Land restoration significantly contributes to food and water security and secures both on-farm and off-farm biodiversity, which is critically important for today and future generations. Urban forestry and agroforestry help secure water catchment areas around cities, help reduce soil erosion and help improve air quality. So planting indigenous trees, efficient use of water and practicing soil conservation techniques on the land instead of applying inorganic fertilisers will revive land and protect vital water catchment areas outside cities. Now, the African continent has set ambitious targets to bring under restoration about 127 million hectares by 2030 under the AFR 100. And initiatives such as the Great Green Wall in the Sahel region are up and running with the potential to reverse degradation and desertification for millions of hectares of land. The private sector, both agribusiness and agrifinance players, are called to join forces with governments to achieve these ambitions for today and for future security of the supply chains. The High Level Champions team, in collaboration with the IUCN and others, are pushing for an accelerated effort towards 80 million hectares of land under restoration by 2030. That's in just 9 years' time. And we need Africa's agribusinesses and young agripreneurs to lead the way. Did you know that we have an insect farmer from South Africa as a youth fellow in our team? She and many other peers have a vision for net zero agriculture in Africa and for changes in the sources of protein, which is revitalised by young farmers. They want farmers to be supported with the best information, including traditional knowledge, and the best technology, paired with fair commercial arrangements and finance which leads to profitable, nature-friendly agriculture and which restores ecosystem and provides sustainable food sources. This is a future where it's not just the cities where young people go to find work, but it's land and farming too. And of course, finally, I mentioned cities, the main theme of this conference, and the third pillar of this vision of a net zero Africa, which lies with cleaner, greener cities and clean transport. As I said, Africa's cities have the fastest urbanisation rates in the world, twice the global average. And as your conference preamble notes, in 2050 we expect an additional 1 billion people to be living in African cities. So the need for green buildings and clean infrastructure is only going to intensify. So I want to commend city leadership in cities such as Accra, Durban, Freetown, Dar es Salaam, Joburg and Kampala and elsewhere for leading the way forward to net zero cities in the 2040s. We now have 13 cities in Africa signed up to the race to zero. And construction, both planned and unplanned, is underway. And we know that. In Africa, 80% of the buildings that you'll have in 2050 are not yet built. So building for mitigation as well as adaptation and resilience is key. And given the long lag between design and construction, that means that decisions that are made today need to avoid locking in emissions in inefficient new infrastructure. In 2018, the African building sector accounted for 61% of final energy use and 32% of energy-related CO2 emissions, without even considering the manufacturing emissions associated with construction materials. However, we have an opportunity to build right from today and to create green jobs, skills and training and sustainable growth through widespread green building in Africa. Now, to do that, African cities need to be more proactively supported to enable the right forms of investment that are seeking to provide quality built environments. And recent analysis by the IFC has found that over $1.5 trillion in climate investment opportunities in sub-Saharan African cities, with the highest share in green buildings, nearly half of that. That's a huge opportunity. So urban champions, please note, this is where you need to focus. Work with government and city leadership, businesses and investors on the futures of your cities. And of course, it's not just construction that concerns us with cities. Cities are crucial in the fight against climate change in so many ways, from transport to how we green more spaces in cities, how we plan cities to be more resilient, and how we develop secure, clean water supplies for growing populations, especially those living in informal settlements, and how we deal with heat stress, which is known to be a climate threat for cities around the world. We've seen Cape Town deal with a drought crisis. We saw Beira and Quelimane deal with the devastating impact of cyclones. And given current predictions, we will see Lagos and her millions of residents having to deal with heat stress also. The Carbon Disclosure Project released its study last week, which found that 1 in 4 cities lack the funds to protect themselves from severe climate hazards like overheating, flooding and water shortages. The good news is that 65% of African cities already have an adaptation plan, and 82% of cities in Africa are taking actions to protect their people, including flood mapping, tree planting and creating green space. Cities across Africa are innovating. Dakar is piloting the use of an invasive cattail plant as insulation in buildings to reduce energy use and regulate temperatures. What is needed now is the investment and private sector involvement to underpin and accelerate these plans. City and government leadership need to drive this process of drawing up investable plans with clear, organised asset classes and give potential investors the confidence to invest and wait for the returns to come in. And finally, a really important part of city emissions, around about 30%, comes from transport running on fossil fuels. So we need to change that and deliver not just emissions reductions, but clean air for residents. E-vehicles have multiple benefits. It's much cheaper to run your taxi on a charger using renewable energy than buying petrol at the pump, and much quieter and healthier, which city residents want too. Now we have Uganda, South Africa, thanks to Nelson Mandela University and others, and all leading the way on producing e-vehicles for 2 and 3 wheelers. So my vision of a net zero city in Africa is one where the air is clear of diesel fumes, where the roads are bustling with traffic, but without the invasive drone of engine noise. And on those roads are lots of 2 and 3 e-wheelers and clean, safe buses running on e-chargers around town. So finally, I want to say a huge thank you to ICLEI for hosting this incredible 5-day event, stacked with innovative ideas and forums. Thank you to all the partners for hosting virtual tours, for showcasing what cities and communities and their urban champions are already achieving, and for the games and events and the crucial conversations which open up our mindsets and lead to greater collective effort on sustainable urbanisation. Thank you so much.